No. It's probably in the show. No, yes. No, it's the new Koran English with the Rashi. It's very easy to read. Sorry. I'm not supposed to let people know that the shear is here before I say it, because that's how I figure it out. Okay. Good evening, everyone. We're just waiting for Chumash to come in. I'm going to press. First, thank you all very much for coming in the rain and taking your chances with getting back home. If you happen to live, in the south anywhere, they're expecting flooding tonight. So actually, it's all that like they'd be washed out. Just waiting 1 second to get it finished. Thank you. So once again, we have an opportunity this year, which is a Shana Mu'uberet, to deal with the Parashat as itself. Something concerned with its interrelation with Parashat Zachor, and so we've got a pure, straightforward Tezaveh, and we can organize our Tezaveh, same like we did Bezrat Hashem, same as we did with Truma last week. So again, let me just review some of the basic Yesodot that we've spoken about in the past that relate. I'm supposed to be able to give you a share with your smile. So some of the basic Yesodot that we've given in the past about the structure of the parsha will make it easier for us to deal with the Minyan. So first of all, on the surface, the relationship between Truma and Tezaveh is very clear. In that it appears that Truma is essentially the elements of Binyan, so that the actual construction of the Mishkan is last week. There's the constructions for the construction. And then we have this new idea of the concept of the Aveda in the Mishkan, which requires the Kahuna, and therefore we focus really on both on the Bigdei Kahuna and then on the Miluim, which make it possible to have the Kedusha of the Kahuna and the Kedusha of the Mizbeach, which allows us to be Oved. Now there's a very, very clear flaw in all of that. And the very clear flaw is the fact that, as all of the Mefarshim point out, it seems to be absolutely ridiculous that we leave the central part of the Mishkan, which is the Mizbeach HaKtoret, which is right there in front of the Aron HaBris. I mean, it's like, how in the world do you leave that for the end? And that's the centerpiece. And we sort of forget about it until, it reads, when you read that part, it's as if you're transported back to Truma. Just listen to the language, because another very important difference between the two parshas, as we'll see, is the language. This language is exactly what we have in Truma. V'yasita mizbeach miktar ktoret atzeshitim tasoto amorko amorko. It sounds familiar. Zibitoto zahav. It's the classic formula for construction in Truma in terms of the v'yasita, which is not what we find here generally. And where to put it? And then you have the end of what it's used for, which, as we pointed out last week, is part of the Indian of the Lechet Machsheva, which is given to everyone in the kingdom that we said before. And so it ends indeed. Fine, okay. Sounds as if someone did a terrible editing job and left out the truma, one of the pieces that should have belonged in the middle of truma, where we're constructing the kalim inside of the heichal, and then throws it in as an afterthought here in Tezaveh, which is very disturbing because it tears apart our simple characterization of the two parshiot as being one of them binyan and one of them kahuna. Very powerfully tears it apart. Now that this is central to an understanding of the entire parsha is obvious from the fact that the opening of the parsha, which is Tezaveh b'nei Yisrael v'kol lecha shemen zayit zach, is a complete interruption of the flow, no matter how you learn, right? Because what is that doing over here? We don't have anything yet about the completion of the Ovdim. Right? The Rambam splits up the halachas into Hilchas Klei HaMikdash ve'Ovdim. That's the Hilchas Beis HaBechira, Hilchas Beis Klei HaMikdash ve'Ovdim. And then you have the dinim of the korbanos and the things that you do and so on. To stick in the middle, the idea of hadlaka of the menorah, which actually comes later on, this doesn't see it. It's not associated with the kli, as we already discussed the menorah and the fact that we need to do the hadlaka earlier in terms of the lechus b'chshavas. The mitzvah of hadlaka is not here either. This is sort of telling you when. What do I need to know when? Who's interested in this? So that it strikes you right away that, whoa, what is this doing here? Okay, now I understand afterwards. Okay, ex post facto. And I never even heard anything about Yarochuto, whoever heard of Aron. There's no such thing. So we're talking about something that, again, is one of these very striking out of order. It's as if we're supposed to know the whole thing and then go back and read it because we really don't understand it. But fine, let's say when we get to the end of the parsha, where we read Ubaha'alot ha'aronot hanerot ben ha'arbaim yaktirena, that means the relationship between the first words of the parsha and the last words of the parsha are very, very powerful. The entire idea of what we're building up to somehow in the parsha is to be able to get to the relationship of the first words, which are the shemen of the menorah and the concept of the hadlaka, the aricha, together with the yaktirena on the mizbeach haktoret. So it's clear that the parsha somehow, the end goes all the way back to the beginning. Even though we don't understand the beginning, it's obvious that this is a strongly integrated parsha where we're developing something, and it leaves us, even more shocked. It's one thing maybe to explain just the fact of the mizbeach haktoret, but to be able to get the entire idea of a parsha enclosed in inyanim, neither of which we understand what it is that they're doing itself over here. I don't think seems to be plucked out of nowhere. One of the things we know that the Medrash itself holds that this is very much a key to understanding the parsha, because that's the entire Tanchuma. We find this in many Midrash that interrelates. In fact, Rabbeinu Bachya brings this as his main psicha, which is the idea of shemen uktoret yismach lev. Whatever that means, the fact is that Shlomo HaMelech sees a fundamental interrelationship not between the hadlaka per se, you understand? Shemen uktoret. And that's how we begin. We don't begin with the hadlaka. We begin with v'yikrei lecha shemen zayit zah. Not to be confused with ba'alotecha tanirot. The purpose of the shemen is la'alot ner tamid. But as if the shemen as a lakicha becomes almost a new kli in and of itself. And because of that, it's so striking that it's clear that the pasuk in Mishlei is saying something unique about the structure of the whole parsha that would relate these two things. Okay, not that helps us very much in understanding how it is that this parsha should include inyanim of binyan. That's very difficult to understand. So, the next hint, I think, comes from the actual structure, particularly the structure of the parshiot. So we will see that we were missing a very important point. And that is that, strangely, our Seder of Tezaveh does not begin in a Parsha Ptucha, as if it's the beginning of a new Inyan. It's in the middle of the Parsha Ptucha, from the previous parsha. No, it starts with one sub-paragraph within that parsha. And that parsha is back in Chavav Yud Tezaveh, where we begin. Now that is the pasuk, which comes immediately after all of the kalim and the materials that are made for the Mishkan. That begins with the words of V'asita takrirashim la'mishkan atzeh shetimonu. The parsha V'asita takrirashim la'mishkan comes to an end really only with the next parsha Ptucha, which is the end of the story of the bringing Aaron into it, So we have the next 6 psukim. Akrev elechet Aaron achicha, asita bigdei kodesh, tedaber al kol chachmei lev, ve'im yikchu et hazahav, et atchelet, v'at hagarman, v'et ulat hashanim, v'et hashesh, and that's the end of, it's the strangest thing. That's the major break between the previous major break, which begins v'asita takrashim. That's completely and totally nonsensical. It certainly appears on the surface. Unless we understand that what we're talking about over here is something very, very different, which, again, as we've seen, is hinted at in the Psak of the Rambam. The Psak of the Rambam, which is that a zar is kosher lechatchila for hadloka v'mera, which, as the Kesef Mishnah brings him in the Ritva asks him, and the other Rishon, how is that impossible? We know when it says Aaron, so it's always a din specifically in Kayin. Aaron, over here it says both Aaron and Kayin. The Gemara says, we quotes this, Aaron itself is not sufficient, but if it says both Aaron and Kahuna, so then it's definitely a din in Kahuna. So how does it check to say that even Lechatchila, big discussions among the Achronim, is a famous Brisker Rov on it, but what is the pashtus of what's going on over here is the striking fact that the parsha is not a description of Aaron at all as Kohen, really. The proof of that is that the din of the Kahuna is emergent from the din of Shevet Levi. Now remember that the pretense, at least, according to some of the actuality of the parsha here, is that it's a description of Mishkan before the Mosaic, right? That's what we're pretending. So if that's the case, even if the Tzivur hears the Malchus Yom Kippurim, and that we mentioned last week, that was a Machlokes, it's a Machlokes in the Midrashim, it's a Machlokes between the Rishonim, between the Mefarshei HaMikra. But one thing is for sure, that the idea of the changeover from Bechor to Levi hasn't even been hinted at, right? And that is something that takes place really only later on in Midbar. We go through that whole process. We know that in the Divrei HaYomim, so there the Torah is presenting us the development of Yehusim in terms of Malchus and Kahuna and so on. So there the Pasuk makes it very clear. The Vayikadesh, the entire Shevet of Levi, B'Yesh Kadesh, and then Vayikadesh Aaron, Liot Kodesh Kodashim. Obviously, in order to get Kodesh Kodashim, you first have to have the Darga of Kodesh Kalim, so to speak, which is Shevet Levi. None of that takes place over here. Not only does it not take place, but we have a remarkable medrash that points out that it's not supposed to take place. So the Lashon, trust the iPad, I'll try it again, right? No, sorry. That's what happens when you put in modern words in Bechayecha. So here, the Medrash has a beautiful description of the interaction between HaKadosh Baruch Hu and Moshe Rabbeinu. So here comes HaKadosh Baruch Hu and says, Moshe, listen, I need the Shemin HaMishkan, you're going to make me Gadol, and so on. So Moshe says, it starts getting very excited. I just want to ask, very shalom, is a Shevet? I'm hoping, so the Baruch Hu says, yeah, sure enough, it's Mishevet Levi. Very good. Wow. So Moshe says, Somach Moshe, Amar, wow, Kach Shifti Chaviv Lifnei HaKadosh Baruch Hu. I'm so moved. Kadosh Baruch Hu says, nonsense. Chayecha lo shivtecha. There's nothing to do with your shevet. It's achicha. Shenemar akrev Aaron achicha. So, in other words, the fact that it's Aaron achicha is not because he is being mekudesh b'tok shevet Levi. He's being mekudesh specifically because this is Aaron. Now that means, and this is the way the Rabbeinu Bachya explains it, when he begins his psicha with Shemen Ukteres Yismach Lev, so he says that in the same way that we find after Maaseh Bereshit, Yismach Hashem b'Maasav, and that Yismach Hashem b'Maasav has to be Keneged Mishkan, because Mishkan is the equivalent of Ma'aser Shemayim V'Aretz, and so on, right? So what do we find by Bria Shemayim V'Aretz? Kishem Shematzinu, Achar Maaseh Bereshit, that the very last ingredient in Maaseh Bereshit, Nivra Ba'acharona, Mishuhu Makir et Hashem, so that somebody has to be conscious, aware of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Ve'oved u'miached. And that is the meaning of Adam, Hu Adam. Kein Matzino Acharei Maaseh HaMishkan, we have exactly the same thing. We need a person who is aware and Oved and Miached. And that's the Kohen Gadol. And that Kohen Gadol is the Hashras Hashkinah ben Mishkan. Therefore, we have here the Yismach Lev is completed with Aaron HaKohen. So what that means is, and this also the Meshech Chochmah points out that the normal, he ascribes, I don't know whether it's a mistake in the Tfus or whether he ascribes some of it as Sforno. I don't know which Sforno he's talking about. But anyway, but what he describes is the unique relationship that we have here to Aaron as a chelik of the Mishkan. Because the same way that the Mizbeach is given a Meshicha of Shemen, just with Shemen, Aaron is given just with Shemen. Afterwards, in the Parshas HaMiluyim, so there it says to take the Dam Me'al HaMizbeach, mix it with the Shemen HaMishkan, and that, in terms of Aveda, all of the Kohanim are sprinkled with that Dam and that Meshicha. But the Meshicha qua Meshicha, which is not related to the act of Aveda, but is just the plain Meshicha, that is different, and that, in fact, is a function of part of the Mishkan itself. So in other words, on this level, we're not talking about something that you do in the Mishkan. We're talking about that which is the chip, so to speak, that makes the Mishkan work. Now this is expressed lahalacha as well, because here, as the Ramban says, that this unites the union of the Shemen Uktoret is Yismach Lev, because what you find is two special halachot that has to do with Aaron qua Aaron. One is the Rambam points out that for some reason there's a habloka here that is mentioned in terms of Aaron, which is not translated into mitzvah l'deres of kahuna. So why indeed does it say it? And Bechlal, even if you learn not like the Rambam, so it's always in kosher l'chatchila, fine. But why does it say Aaron? If it's certainly not a din in the Kohen Gadol, any Kohen is making. So the Ramban says that there is a unique relationship between Aaron and the menorah, because he, in fact, was matlik his entire life, only he was matlik the menorah, which is interesting because, of course, that comes later in terms of Ba'alotecha Shulchan Gadol Mishalahem. That Shulchan Gadol Mishalahem is Lohu V'lo Shifto. The relationship of why it says Ba'alotecha is not only because Shevet Levi was left out of the process of the Chinuch of the Beis HaMikdash, but because he felt that he was left out. So the Shulchan Gadol Mishalahem later on becomes a Shulchan Gadol Mishalahem in terms of himself as well. He felt, and this is what Rabbeinu Bachya points out, that that relationship to Or is part of the Etzem Hashras Hashkinah. That is something that he is uniquely hired to take care of during his lifetime. And then, of course, you have also beautiful diak. This is actually a medrash, but this diak in the Lashon of the Pasuk is dafka for the Meshech Chochmah, But this is a famous medrash, and it's a Machlokas Rishonim, and the Gra brings this medrash, La'alocha, the Al Yavo B'chol Eit Al HaKodesh. There's a big medrash about it, that Moshe Rabbeinu asks HaKadosh Baruch Hu, this is what that means, that my brother is essentially locked out of the Keteres and the Kodesh HaKadoshim, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, no. B'chol that he wants to come, he can come. U'bilvad she'yaseh ke'avodah hazot, which is achrei mot, right? It's the idea of bizot yavos. As long as it's bizot, he can come bizot. Now, obviously, that is not true of other kohanim. Nobody is allowed at any time of the year to be able to go in. Okay, so how is that? So the Gra explains that the issue is that since it says beferish in the pasuk, ki be'anan era'el hakaporet, and that becomes the need for this avodah of the besot carrying in the Ketara, specifically to create the anan, which now allows the anan hashkina to be shared and everything that goes on there. But that's not nogea during the lifetime of Aaron, because during the lifetime of Aaron, the anan was shared. You didn't need to create an anan with the Ketara. What he leaves out is something much more powerful, which is the fact that the Onan was there because of Aaron. So it'd be a little ridiculous. That's the whole source of the Onan was for Aaron. So it would be ridiculous to lock out Aaron and say he has to create a situation in order that the Onan should be sharing the base of Mikdash, and therefore it can only be done at this time with this level of Kedushin, and then they're preparing for 7 days and the whole business. What does it nagea him? That's why the Onan is in the Mishnah. So of course he can come whenever he wants. But the Knisa has to be in terms of that special Chabibas and the Keteris and so on, which relates the two elements of Aaron here, the two special elements of the Shemen and the Ketara, the Yismach Lev, at least on the surface, relates it specifically to Aaron, the beautiful diuk of the Meshech was very lovely. So it says in the passage like this, V'chiper Aaron al karnotav achat bashana. Midam chatata kippurim achat b'shana yechaper alav. What's this achat b'shana repetition? It says, "V'chiper Aaron karnotav achat b'shana." Midam chatata kippurim achat b'shana yechaper alav. This is a complete redundancy, unless the idea of the "V'chiper Aaron karnotav achat b'shana" means it's only a chiyuv for Aaron achas b'shana. Then, when it continues on and says, "Midam chatata kippurim achat b'shana yechaper alav l'dorotechem," that's not in front of Aaron. That is a maximum. So in other words, you can come in once a year in order to be mechaper, which has nothing to do with Aaron's case. And so you might think that maybe he doesn't even have to do this whole avodah. No, he's once a year minimum. He has to do this avodah. But for the dorotechem, then indeed it's achat b'shana. And only Yaakov Shana. It works out very nicely. Because you have a remnants in the first Gufa. So the first thing is distinction.
The first thing is the Aaron HaKohen himself.
Aaron HaKohen, you should know, is mechuyev once a year.
And
it's
everyone
not
else,
limited.
right? And everyone else can only do
come once a year. And that's why it relates specifically to Kapara, whereas for him it's not again specifically. Well, maybe it is. I mean, the Meshech
says the Chipper Aaron.
Yeah, so the Meshech says that it, and you say, it's sort of a about the Shesvor. I mean, he says, maybe because since during this man in the Mishnah, everybody was eating all of their basar was basar kosher. So in the Mela you needed a tremendous amount of kapara for too much bigger for Kedusha, which you have to do. Like, so okay, so for the rest of the time we're just bringing korbanos once in a while. No, okay, fine, whatever. But there's an attempt to incorporate the v'chiper. But I'm saying it's not. The idea is still a very powerful idea. It doesn't matter these days. Rabbaneh, can I maybe bother you, which will serve as a wake up, to turn off the air conditioning? You have to do a little dance with it, and just aim it. You hold the button down and you dance around with it. It's a rain dance, and then when you hear it, keep it down. Go. And then when there you go. That's wonderful.
Ooh, you're good.
Yeah, I'll be like that.
Yeah.
For no reason. Yes. Very good.
So close.
Fine. Now, okay, so this is the first issue. Obviously, it doesn't really help yet until we actually explain the relationship to binyan. Well, it happens to be a very good explanation of relationship. If we're right about the Krashim, so then that means that we see Aaron, and this is true in terms of the Mashiach as well, as part of binyan. If that's the case, then the idea of the Mizbeach Miktar Ketoret is only possible to discuss at this point because the Zer is Keneged Kahuna, and that Zer of Kahuna doesn't exist until we've described what it is that Aaron is bringing into the mix. So in other words, whatever is being done by Aaron in terms of the Hashras Hashchina is truly, in a sense, ex post facto. In other words, we have all of the background, but it's not alive. So the Mishkan will not live without consciousness. And the thing that provides it consciousness is only Aaron. And therefore, that which is added by Ketoret, and we'll see much more how that, I mean, this is just a technical thing. It doesn't help us to explain why Davka Ketoret and what the relationship is and how it is that the entire parasha builds itself between these two inyanim of the menorah and the Ketoret, but we'll get to that.
Only that Zer is kind of the Kahuna? What about
That only that Zer. The Gemara says that's the only thing that says three Zeri, and this is the only Zer that's going to get Zer. Yeah. Okay, so I know. Okay, Torah we had, that's the honor, and Malchus we have, that's Moshe already, as the Medrash says. He says the Gemara says that's why you be sure in Malchus. It's already as it in a Malchus. That's where it's a Caliph of in the end. And Malchus, but not Kahuna, hasn't been created yet. So this idea of at least the precursors of the concept of Kahuna, which come out over here, once Aaron exists as Aaron, then we can begin discussing the Ketars. Why the Ketars has this special thing, that's something else. So first of all, we see Aaron qua Aaron. Aaron is an actual chelik of the Mishkan. Now, as we continue, we find more complex issues that have to do with Aaron. And in fact, these explain some of the other strange things about the Parsha. Because we know that, as Rashi explains, there are two dinim that are expressed in the word for Kohen. So in one place, Rashi says Kohen is a lashon of misharet mamash, and elsewhere Rashi says that the lashon of Kohen is a lashon of sar. And you find sar like you find bnei David Kohanim, right? Or he uses to explain Kohen on, and so on. This doesn't mean this is any Komer level that Kohavim. It's called a Kohen because of the fact that he is a priest. It's that simple sense of the Misharet. In a church, that he would be a priest, you call that a Kohen also, right? But the sense of Chashivut, if it's clearly in terms of Chashivut, then it's an aspect of, remarkably, the word is exactly the same word. It's the relationship not to Sheirut, but to Sarut. Right? So that it's a lotion. Sar is opposed to a lotion of being Misharet. And we'll see Shlomo Melchus Merames even to that issue directly. And we'll get to understand a little bit more deeply the issues that are being raised over here. Which means, and Rashi actually uses this to describe things that the Torah itself doesn't describe. So, for instance, we know that we have two completely different Sidorim in terms of the Begodim. Right? One of them is we have the Big Day Kohen Gadol, we have the Arba Begodim of the Kohen Hedyot. The only problem is that the Big Day Kohen Hedyot in the structure of the Parsha include the tzitz, which is ridiculous because the tzitz is Kaddish Kadosh, and it's the Kaddish Hashem, and that's mamish where it's Keneged is Machshava. That seems to be the ultimate that the Kohen Gadol. I mean, obviously, it shouldn't have anything to do with. It's put together with the underpants, basically. I mean, what in the world is the tzitz, which is like the highest element, put together with a beggar that isn't really even given the quality of beggar, because as it says, I mean, I understand it's a logistic thing when you want to walk around with a pumpkin thing over your erva. So, okay, you have Niklasai. I mean, it's like a description of something that has no real value in terms of the beged, the covet, the tiferes, and so on, which is the way that we introduce the whole idea. I mean, everybody wears underwear. That's what's the big deal. So the fact that there should be a kahuna, I mean, it doesn't even look as nice as it's a nice pair of Brooks Brothers underwear. I mean, it's very, very simple. So, I don't know. Where's the covet, the tiferes, and that? What in the world is it going together with the tzitz for? Now, if we understand this distinction of Kohen as Misharet and Kohen as Sar, then it makes a great deal of sense. Because in terms of the Sherut, we do not need any of the begodim that are central to the identity of Kohen Gadol, except that he has to be Kohen Gadol. It can't be Mechusar begodim. But for begodim, we can use the Bigdei Kohen Hedyot, except for one thing. We need to have tzitz. Even though we're Kohen Hedyot, somebody's got to be wearing the tzitz. Why? Because we need the tzitz to be maratza in the event that there's any problems with Damrei Murim that we need to move. So therefore, so that means the one thing that the Kohen Gadol is specifically a misharet in terms of dealing with karbonos is the tzitz. And therefore the tzitz is listed together with the begodim of the mishartim as opposed with the begodim of the sari. And so it becomes now a transitional beged, which allows that connection between those two issues. Now this idea of his identity as a sar, as opposed to a simple misharet, as a janitor, so to speak, who's doing all the dirty work, is expressed in the nature of the beged that he wears. And the truth is, once you understand where the tzitz belongs, then in actuality, you really only have one central idea of the Bigdei Kohen, and that is the ephod, which breaks up into the ephod, the me'ila ephod, the cheshava ephod, and the kitva is ephod, and everything, the cheshana ephod. I mean, so everything is built around that aspect. Even though the me'il goes under the ephod, but nonetheless goes the me'il ha-ephod, right? So that means, and Rashi builds on this to do an amazing thing, because the relationship of these begodim, specifically to the sarut of Aaron, which has to do with that which enables him to be the agency that the Rabbi Nebuch explains over here as the makir, the oved, the individual who is keneged Adam, and miyachid is brought out very clearly with the Zichron B'nai Yisrael. So you're supposed to carry the Zikaron of B'nai Yisrael, and the miyachid of it is very, very interesting. Yishbitzer that points out that the miyachid aspect is related to Rabbi Nebuch. But if you work out, depends on how you understand Ketol Dotam. Something's wrong with the Ketol Dotam. This whole discussion, Ketol Dotam doesn't really mean Ketol Dotam in terms of the dates of their birthday. But first you have to split up the children of Leah and you split them up. So he explains that the miyached aspect is that the two avonim carry sets of people, each of whom believe that the other ones are crazy, basically. Now, they have totally different paradigm of how it is that they go about life, which leads to so many problems. But that ability of his to be miyached them and to integrate is brought out specifically by the tremendous difference in the avonim that he's carrying. Okay, but however one understands it, the Torah is me'ida alav that he carries his zikaron b'nei Yisrael on his heart and Pnei Hashem. Okay, so that means, we'll see what it means to carry a zikaron in your heart as opposed to in your mind. And usually zikaron has to do with awareness. We'll talk about that. But remarkably, Rashi builds on that to say 2 times in his Pirush, I don't have any mocker for the Pirush I'm about to tell you, but Libi Omerli, my heart tells me, and then he goes on further, that's in terms of the ephod. Then he goes on further in terms of the Choshen. Ve'od Omerli Libi. He's taking this very far. So now
He was French.
his heart is, yes, it's true. His heart is talking to him about the Beged, which is all about heart. I mean, it's hard to believe that isn't something that connects to the whole idea. And I'll explain to you, I hope, if we're Zohar, why that's true and why Rashi felt that he could do it. But his insight into that Beged is that it's got to be a riding cape. So you take a look at the women where they get on the horses and they're doing the riding of the sarot, and the princesses, they're all wearing a riding cape. And therefore, the sarut, and he has to explain all of this, so this is like a riding cape. Therefore, the ephod must be behind him, must go up like a cape, and he describes everything in the ephod according to that vision that he has of what is, it's not of the slightest idea, really, because it doesn't talk about in the bright and Melechat HaMishkan. And I mean, it's just an amazing thing for us to just come up out of thin air with a picture of an ephod that all the books are printing. This is the picture of the ephod, the temple, what do they call that? Temple Institute is creating these ephods based on this vision in Rashi's heart. And so it's pretty amazing. And the truth is
that goes Rashi's whole.
What's it? Totally.
Whole style.
Whole style. Yeah, it's just amazing. Everything is always so completely clear as to where he gets it from, and incorporating all of the various midrashim and basis. Yeah, amazing. Yeah. I mean, that's why he was there. So one of the remarkable things backing up Rashi is the fact that the idea of a riding cape is particularly a concept that has to do with the idea of sarut, not because women who ride horses happen to wear riding capes, but because any pianist that you see is wearing a riding cape, and any conductor that you see is wearing a riding cape, and anytime you are invited to a wedding that is choshev, you're supposed to be wearing black tie and tails of all things, which of course is the ephod that's supposed to be behind you, which is ridiculous, unless there is an innate relationship, which is why really a tie is just a backward tail, right?
I just saw,
That's
I
crazy.
forget which Gadol Hador, but one of them, Paskin, that teachers in Cheder need to wear a frock.
A frock.
With the tails in the back, because they have to have the chashivah so the kids see that there's a chashivah.
Okay,
So
excellent.
they're, I just saw
Very good. All right. So the tie knot, I don't know why. No black tie and tails. No black tie. Okay. But the idea over here, of course, is Batadiv was here on Shabbat. So she pointed out that one of the big studies in terms of Rembrandt and that whole Kufa, if you analyze the way portraiture was done, it was always done utilizing a cape of some kind. And the cape was used as an extension of the presence of the person. So the person could fill the picture, and therefore it's like a whole chokhmah of how to position the person that you were painting. But the idea over here is, and this mulam is in the pasuk as well, Kishemen hatov hayored al zakan Aaron, right? Which is yored al midotav ketal chermo. This is the Mefarshim explained there. Yored al midotav is that you may put it on him, but it extends outwards. Such that the idea of sarut is that, just like a kala is always going to wear a long train. That's the value of the long train, just a trick. The value of the long train is essentially the idea of the extension of the chashivas and how far the impact is of this person's presence, how far it extends and goes outside of you. And the very fact that it's unnecessary makes it part of the sarut. So therefore, Rashi says, it seems to me that would have to be the issue. How it is that the hashpah of Aaron extends outwards. Okay, so I understand that that's really splitting up in a very deep way his understanding of what the actual word means of Kohen and how it's expressed in different ways within Aaron and with the idea of the Kohanim who are not the Kohanim Gedon, the Kohanim Hedya that are talks of over here. But it doesn't explain the differences. There's a lot of similarities. No question, a lot of similarities. as we pointed out. I mean, it looks like you're just adding things to the Asiya. However, you'll notice that the Lashon of the Asiya is very different over here, so that our parsha opens up with a whole new way of telling, we never heard before, Tezaveh Bnei Yisrael, not Tezaveh Bnei Yisrael, and so on. And furthermore, he doesn't tell them what to do. As if this, obviously, one understands that that's an idiom, right? I understand Pashtus. Be mitzaveh v'yikru, that they should be v'yikru. So the vav becomes one of those vav transitional vavs. But if you take a look in the continued presence, first of all, of the viata tetzaveh, viata hakrev, viata tedaber. And so what in the world is this? We never heard of this once before. All we heard about was v'yasu et Aaron, and then v'yasita. Not one thing like this. All of a sudden we're talking about there being a tzivui, and then things happen. This defines the reality. Out of that reality comes the fact that they will indeed do it. You'll be mitzvah, they will be v'yikreila. And for some reason, it's nogeh specifically the v'yatam, so that it has to be the result of you. It's you. Why do you have to bring it to you? You're not doing it. You're not the one. What does it have to be in you? What are you going to do with it exactly? There are all types of pirushim. Maybe it means that Moshe Rabbeinu himself had to examine it to see whether he had a hechsher, because it has to be specifically dafka. This is the only thing that requires this katit lamor. Katit lamor is a very special process in which you get only the first schoolish, even while it's still up there. Okay, so maybe Moshe had to see to make sure that it was nothing that had gotten mixed with that. It's a pretty far-fetched explanation. All of a sudden, we only will accept the hechsher of Moshe Rabbeinu, and nobody else's hechsher is good enough. Okay, hard to believe that that's what it's about. And there's no Tobit Salal to make it and so on, like all these things that we had before. That somehow or other, and this Sforno points out the continuation of the idea that we had last week. And we had this wonderful idea, the idea of how it is that everything has to be done as a Malakas Machshavas. So therefore, you have to know in advance what the thing is, and so on. And the idea of this Sforno is beautiful, beautiful to you. One of these classic Sforno comments. Where he says like this: "Hein yikhu et hazahav" means "Kamo sheyechavnu be'et ha'asiyah, ken yechavnu kisheyikhu et hazahav." That's pretty amazing. So this is an extension of the idea of Malakas Machshavas, that the actual Lakicha itself has to be for the purposes. We had all of these things mentioned before anyway, but they're going to be taking the very things that we said before. So we had Tchelet and Akaman and so on and so forth, but why are they taking it again? Obviously they're taking it. We have a stockpile of things. The stockpile of things were used, the same ingredients of the Talat Shani and the Sheish and so on, all of that was used for creating the covers of the Mishkan as well. But over here, the Asiya of the Begadim has to be with a new Lakicha in order that it should be Bechuvan to that purpose. Or by the Avanim. The Avanim tiyena al Shemot B'nai Yisrael. This is even more. Kishi Yagdishum HaMitnadvim, the Hegdesh has to be L'Shem Kach, Sheyichtavu Alayim Shemot HaShvatim. You can't just bring a donation. We talked about before, the Rabbeinu Bachya in Truma, who says that every aspect of the Truma has to come in together with the Truma Elyoina, which is the Chochma, Bina, the Dad, but never that you have to take into consideration what the ultimate dispensation of the particular material that you were bringing, that it needed to be for that purpose. You understand that there's a remarkable addition here, which this photo doesn't point to, but the remes is quite amazing. Because if you're telling me that the Kishiyikhu et hazahav, that becomes part of Malakas Machshavas. Here, there's a place where this is translated la'alacha. And it's not just a place where it's translated la'alocha. It's translated la'alocha by the people who are taking the material. Where is it translated la'alocha? The place where it's been translated by halacha is Tezaveh. So the akira has to be almanat to be motzi. So suppose you lift the thing up in order to bring it to the other side of the house, and then you're nimlach and you're going to be yotze with your partner. Because the akira was not l'shem the Tezaveh and the sanocha, not to be machayim. Why do I say that is gufa the Tezaveh of these people? Because these were the people that came running to say Marbi Ma'am Lavi, and Moshe Rabbeinu had to say Al Yitzaish, which is the marker of the whole idea of Tezaveh, which is crazy. I mean, that means, even the Ramazim, to what we were talking about last week, of the way that Hilchos Shabbos makes you part of the Aveda Malacha, Imamelach B'malachta, or the Malacha, Oisa Malechas Hashem. It's Oisa Malechas Hashem Ramiyah. Now, no matter what you're doing in life, it's absolutely astonishing. If you even go into Ad Kedei Kach, that deal that it has to be B'shas Lakicha, it's mamish amazing. And that's mamish this piece, right? The Hein Yichlu, these people are the ones specifically who do this. Okay, so what seems, therefore, on the first level, to be just an extension of Truma, the idea of the way in which we're continuing by God. On the second level, it's an extension of the idea of binyan and machshavas. On the third level, it's a new relationship to this individual, and somehow it's interrelating sarut and sherut. Somehow that development occurs between Shemen and Torah, which is really weird. So far, we don't have any idea why that would be true, and understanding the why is important. So let me just point out before we have to go to Myra, an amazing and striking difference that must be the issue between the two Parashat. Remember that last week we discussed Truma in terms of the way that the Mishkan becomes Atzei Shitim Oimtim, so that it becomes an imprinting in the same way that Adam HaRishon was Mutal Gailam, and he wasn't even yet formed, he wasn't even yet alive. HaKadosh Baruch Hu inserts in that existence of a species the Dor V'Dorshav and the Dor V'Chachamav and so on and so forth, right? So the Sifrei Shel Adam HaRishon is part of what he is. The Mishkan, and therefore, when we talk about Betzalel, that's the marker for the whole thing. Karati, B'Shem Betzalel means Karati at the time of Ma'aseh Bereshis with Chochmah and Bina and Das, which turns out to be Hashem B'Chochmah Yasad Aretz and so on and so forth. And this is Betzalel, who was a Baki in the Yosef, Shnivru B'M Shemayim Aretz. And we understood all of that is providing an imprint on the Adam of how it is that Nitzchias, as the Medrash says, what do you mean can Yisrael build a Mishkan? Every individual can build this Mishkan. In other words, we understand if you were given another 100,000 years of life, so that means that that's all part of your potential. Of course, how much of the things that you had in mind that you were going to do, how much life you would give it to achieve it is irrelevant. That's not in your hands. But the fact that your life can be a life that ultimately carried out into its extreme would have achieved Kach, and therefore shares from the inception of the concept back in Gan Eden to the actuality in terms of the Geula. That's a wonderful thing, but that means that it's outside of time. And because of that, we found that indeed, Ein Mukdam U'Muchar B'Torah was fundamental to the whole presentation. In this parsha, it's exactly the opposite. The presentation of things is not as if it's primal, but on the contrary, we're going to create these begodim in such a way that they're meant for your children. It's like that watch advertisement. You don't really own it. You keep it in order to pass it on. And that's exactly what it says over here. By the way, this is so real. It's not just an advertisement in terms of what the B'dei Kun are. because the Medrash says that that's exactly what Moshe Rabbeinu did. So remarkably, it goes up with Aaron, his brother, and they're going up, and Aaron is going to die there. He's bringing Elazar going up. Okay, so understand, HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants Aaron to be zeicha to see Eliezer should be the Kohen Gadol in his place. What does Moshe Rabbeinu do? He puts the begodim on Aaron, and then strips him of the begodim. He puts it on Eliezer. So what is that? It's a literal translation of the pasuk that says Yula Aaron L'Banav Acharav. So it has to go from Aaron L'Banav Acharav. Amazing. And then the presentation of it, and if you don't put it on properly and so on, you're going to die. Be careful that you wear these begodim. That's what this is begodim. I mean, this is what we need to discuss over here, but we haven't gotten to any concept of chait. What are we talking about V'lo tamutu for? And it gets worse, of course, at the end. This whole Ashras Hashchina is in terms of Achas B'Shana. What is that Achas B'Shana? Yom Kippur. What's Yom Kippur? Shh. We'll talk about it later. And so what do I got to know about the whole idea for now? Because this is fundamental to understand the nature of the Ashras Hashchina that he achieves. So, I mean, that means that we have over here the exact opposite of Atzei Shikemayim. This is something that is meant specifically for this, and of course that's the poignancy of the mention of Nadav Avihu here. Nadav, Avihu, Elazar, Itamar. It's like the story of Ashmedai walking by, the guy, there's Ashmedai walking with B'nai, and he sees the guy, he passed by a shoe store. The guy says, he orders, I need a shoe that's guaranteed for 7 years. And as Ashmedai bursts out laughing. So B'nai asks him, what were you laughing about? Says the guy doesn't have 7 days to live. What's he need a 7-year guarantee? It's exactly what happens over here. They don't have 7 days to live. They're going to be dying beyond Shmini. So what are we talking about? Terrorists make a big deal of it. Another Vavio and so on. It's terrible. So I mean, putting all of these things together. So it's a frighteningly different ambience with the Lo Yamutu and so on, and the passing things on. It's the exact opposite of the idea of Atzei Shikemayim. So with that, let's go into Ma'ariv, do our Aveda for the moment. Of course, that's the other issue. Aveda is a very time deal. Exact opposite. We'll get to it.